Today I want to talk about this thing right here. No, it's not an SM7B that I painted white. And also it isn't the Universal Audio SD1. 2 examples is enough. But this is actually a 3D printed microphone kit. So quite simply, it's just an enclosure for a microphone. And right now the microphone that's currently in it is the Shure SM7b. But this idea was created by Caleb Pike. He runs the YouTube channel DSLR Video Shooter. It's a great channel. I've been watching it for years. And when he came out with this, the SM7BS, I was very curious. And being a big audio lover, I gotta tell you that my knee-jerk reaction was that I didn't like it. But the conclusion that I came to is that if someone has a handheld dynamic microphone that they don't like the look of, and they want to buy this 3D printed enclosure, who am I to stop them? But then it occurred to me that the important thing to do was to actually buy one of these enclosures, see how it worked, and I just wanted to see if I put a microphone in here if it will affect the sound poorly in any way. I bought it on Gear Focus directly from Caleb Pike. In the initial video that Caleb Pike put out, he tested it with the Behringer XM8500 and the Shure SM58. To be blunt, a handheld dynamic microphone isn't meant to have an enclosure around it like this. These microphones are designed very specifically, tested very thoroughly to be good at a few certain things. Being jammed inside of an enclosure is not one of those things. They did not test for that. So long story short, that's why I'm here today. I'm going to test that out. I was mainly curious if it would affect the tone of microphones in a certain way, if there would be any vibrational issues, anything like that. So my purpose here today isn't to talk bad about Caleb Pike or this or anyone that would want to buy it, because I have seen some comments that are extremely negative towards it. But of course, if I do have any opinions to add, I'll put it at the end of the video, so it's optional for you to check out, okay? But I will do a couple different sound comparisons with different microphones. But if you do decide to purchase the SM7BS, I do want to let you know it does not come with this windscreen. This windscreen, I believe, was about an extra $13. I'll link this windscreen down below. But I do also want to let you know if you don't like this white, it does come in a black version that does look a little bit more similar to the SM7B. If you have a 3D printer and you're thinking about making this, go ahead, it's not going to cost you much. And it could be a fun thing just to mess around with. But if you don't have a 3D printer like I don't, and if you would just rather buy it directly from Caleb Pike like I did, it goes for $49.95. And on top of that, it does have $10 shipping. And that's from Gear Focus. I'll link his store down below. But if you do decide to buy this for like $60 including shipping, it will come with the 3D printed SM7B body, a microphone grill, and the mount that is a 5/8 inch threading, a microphone adapter insert just for different sized microphones. And then it will come with a few screws to put it all together. And one thing that is cool is that the actual SM7B windscreen does fit in here. And you might be like, why is that cool? Because actually the SM7B windscreen does have this little plastic part on the bottom of it. But Caleb actually took note of that and made it work. And now you're actually listening to this with the Shure SM7B windscreen on it. And now we have the replacement back on. Now this is 3D printed, so the build quality isn't good. I mean, it's about what I expected, maybe a little bit worse than I expected. It's definitely something that when you're putting the screws in, you'll want to be careful and you don't want to tighten them too much and crack it. But now let's go ahead and do a couple sound comparisons, see if this enclosure affects the tone of the microphone at all. And during this whole video and during these sound comparisons, I will just be running these microphones directly into my Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. It's a very popular interface, and I feel like a lot of people either are using something similar to it or something that's comparable. Right now, the windscreen is not on the SM7BS, it's just the SM57 in there, and now I've switched over to the Shure SM57 without anything on it, without an enclosure or anything. And here's how that sounds. I'll label whatever microphone I'm using down here. Spirit fingers, I'll just switch back and forth. But if you were going to use the Shure SM57 for podcasting, I would actually recommend buying the Shure windscreen. This is the A2WS, and this windscreen is actually awesome. It locks on the Shure SM57. You just slip it on there and screw it into place. As simple as that. And quite honestly, I think this looks really cool. In fact, I actually used the SM57 and this windscreen on Bark and I's podcast, The Obscure Hotline. I'll link the episode down below if you want to check out how it would actually sound in a podcast long-form situation. But I actually think it sounded solid. It looks good with this windscreen on. The SM7BS does look more like an SM7B, and yeah, that's kind of what a lot of professional podcasters use. However, for podcasting, I don't really think the SM7B is necessary, and there are microphones around that price point that I actually think are better for podcasting than the SM7B. There are quite a few music applications that I think the SM7B is great in. I think it sounds good for podcasting, it works, but I don't think it should be like the end-all be-all podcasting microphone. Before this last little bit, you've been listening to the SM7BS with the SM57 in it, and the SM57 with the A2WS windscreen on. I'm interested to hear if there are any sound differences. Yes, windscreens can affect the tone of a microphone a little bit. It can darken it slightly, but I'm interested to hear if the enclosure has a negative effect on the sound at all. I will say I wasn't really expecting it to affect the tone a lot, but I do think there is a possibility it could muffle the sound slightly. I do think if this SM7BS came out like right around the time of the Rode Pod mic, or even a little bit before that, people would have lost their shit. They would have lost their damn minds. And I'm not saying that Caleb Pike had a bad idea, and I'm not saying it's dumb if anyone buys this. I'm just saying there are microphones that kind of make sense if you have to buy the enclosure, but printing it yourself is a little different. But another microphone that I bought used just the other day for $200 is the RE320. This is a fantastic microphone that's probably going to be better than any $20 to $150 handheld microphone that you could put in this enclosure. Get on Reverb, look for an RE320, even look for a used SM7B, or one of my favorites, the RE20. You can get a lot of really good used deals on there for cheaper or not much more than this setup right here that I'm using. But I'm just going to put a few microphones in here and do some really quick back and forths and just see if it affects the tone of the microphone at all. To do completely fair tests, I'm going to have the same windscreen over what I would have on the SM7BS, just so there aren't any tonal or sound differences when it comes to the windscreen, and any differences will actually be because of the enclosure, if there are any. But you've been listening to this handheld dynamic, the AKG D5. Now you are listening to the AKG D5 inside of the SM7BS enclosure. Here's just a real quick sound sample of that for you before we move on to the next microphone. Now here's the sound of the SEV7 with the windscreen on before I put it in the enclosure. Now you are listening to the SEV7 handheld dynamic microphone inside of the SM7BS enclosure. Now here's the sound of the Behringer XM8500, but here's how the XM8500 sounds outside of the enclosure with the windscreen on. Now here is how the very inexpensive Behringer XM8500 sounds inside of the SM7BS enclosure. If you are thinking about buying the SM7BS microphone kit, this is definitely one of the best, cheapest microphones that you can put in here. Now you're listening to the Shure SM58, and this is one of the microphones that was in Caleb Pike's video. But here's how the Shure SM58 sounds outside of the SM7BS enclosure. And now we have the classic, very popular Shure SM58 inside of the SM7BS. You can see this microphone on stages across the world, not literally inside this enclosure, but the microphone itself. And here's how it sounds inside of this enclosure. And this is the sound of the Shure SM57 with the windscreen on that definitely doesn't fit this microphone. And this is before I put it in the microphone's enclosure. And now this is the Shure SM57 in the SM7BS enclosure. Here's how that sounds. Well, now I'm going to give you my opinion on the SM7BS enclosure. Now, to be honest, I'm a little bit torn about this whole thing, and just this whole review in general, because quite honestly, DSLR Video Shooter, Caleb Pike, is a person that I've watched for a really long time on YouTube. I really respect his opinion. I think he does a great job. So when it comes to saying negative things about this, I'm kind of struggling because I respect the guy, but I'm just trying to put it into perspective and just essentially think that if there's a company that I like a lot that comes out with a product, I'm going to judge it fairly, whether I like it or dislike it. So I'm trying to do the same thing here and just ignore the human aspect of this whole thing. Because quite honestly, from an audio standpoint, I just can't recommend the SM7BS. I mean, maybe that was fairly obvious to a lot of people. I was rooting for it to not change the tone of the microphone at all, but I will say when I was listening back to those comparisons of a microphone being in the SM7BS versus not being in the SM7BS, I absolutely did notice a tonal change on my several different professional sets of studio monitors and my different sets of studio headphones. It was almost like the microphones became a little bit more thin. So when it comes to the SM7BS being a microphone enclosure, I get it. It's fun. It looks cool. It looks like an SM7B. But I've got to say, from a practical audio standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. But if you listen back to those comparisons and you're fine with the tonal differences between the microphone being in and out of this enclosure, and it's worth it for you to have this look, then go for it. You can absolutely make that decision on your own. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. I'm just saying, from an audio standpoint, it does alter the sound a little bit. But one thing I do think is very important to talk about are microphones like this. This microphone is a new addition to the SE Dynacaster line. This is the DCM3. And this microphone that looks like this has the broadcast look, actually only goes for $100. And I do want to send a very big thank you to Bark from Obscure Mics. He did send me this microphone to check out and put in this video. But the fact that microphones like this exist for around $100 kind of make the SM7BS make even less sense. This looks great on camera, and if you set it at this angle, I bet a majority of people wouldn't be able to tell if this is an SM7B or the SE DCM3. And if you put one of the cheapest microphones in the SM7BS enclosure, you're getting pretty close in price to $100, where you could just get this that is a better sounding microphone. I just want to clarify, the SM7BS is not a bad idea. This is an idea he had, and more as a video shooter, a little more focused on the visual aspect of it. I can totally see it from that perspective being a good idea. So hopefully this video kind of clarifies a few different things for the SM7BS. And I mostly just wanted to inform you that there are other microphones out there that look awesome on camera, sound awesome, that can be about a similar price and sound better versus whatever handheld dynamic you could put in the SM7BS. But with that being said, I still really hope the DSLR Video Shooter comes out with some more audio-related 3D print ideas. I think that'd be cool. And I do want to state once again, if you have a 3D printer and you can just print this for the cost of the materials, that's kind of a why not situation for me, because at the very least you could use it as a little cool prop in your video or something. But I do want to say there is a product from DSLR Video Shooter that he does 3D print that I think is really awesome. It essentially adds a little locking mechanism to the Rode Wireless Go 2. I've had lavaliers come out of the Rode Wireless Go 2 when I was using it, and it's very frustrating. So a locking mechanism for that is fantastic. When I was editing this, I realized that I should have given you a list of options, a list of microphones that you could go look at that would be similar in price to putting a $20 to $150 microphone in this SM7BS enclosure. We are living in a golden age of inexpensive broadcast-style dynamic microphones. There are a ton for really good deals, like the Samsung Q9X that goes for $130. Even the Rode Procaster, I think, is down to like $170. You got the Deity VO7U, a USB option, the big brother to the DCM3, the DCM6, and this has a built-in mic activator. The Mayano PD400X, the Shure MV7X, there's the Fifine K688. It's not the most solid microphone of all time, but for the very inexpensive price, it's solid. And there are even more options than that. These are ones that I just had close to me. And a lot of these I do have reviews for, or like the SE microphones, the DCM3 and 6, I will have a review out for it soon. But I just wanted to clarify that you can get a cool looking microphone that looks similar to an SM7B. And you don't have to break the bank. You don't even have to get the SM7B, which you could totally get one used for a pretty good deal. But there are just a lot of options out there now. But now I'll jump back to the other guy and he can finish out this video. But thank you for watching this video about the SM7BS. I hope it helped you out and that you had fun. I want to say a big thank you to everyone that subscribes, and the biggest thank you to all the members of the Audio Hotline. Will you just give some sexy eyes to the name on the screen right now? Give them a nice little air kiss, because these people are amazing. They deserve a little air kiss from you, maybe a little, you know. But once again, thank you all for watching the Audio Hotline. I'll see you audio nerds next time.